The sea was never gentle to me, but it was always honest. At dawn, when the horizon blushed faintly with the first breath of sunlight, I was already waist, deep in the salt water, hauling nets that weighed more than my own body. My palms carried scars, the kind that sting when salt gets in them, but I wore those marks proudly. Each cut, each blister, was proof that I was building something from nothing. My name is Elias, and I built my fishing business the way most people wouldn't even dare, one aching muscle and one stubborn dream at a time. When I was 19, I inherited nothing but a rusted rowboat my uncle had left behind when he passed away. Everyone in my family laughed at me when I said I'd try to turn it into a living. Fishing, my mother had scoffed, wrinkling her nose. That stinking work isn't a business, Elias. It's what desperate men do when they have no education. She never saw the way the sea called to me. My father, who spent his life in factory work, only shook his head and muttered, "You'll quit in a week." My younger sister, Claire, wrinkled her face at the smell of fish and teased me whenever I came home soaked in sweat and seawater. But I didn't quit. I couldn't. In the early days, I rode alone into the fog before the sun even woke. My nets were small, my catch smaller. Some mornings I came back with only a handful of mackerel, barely enough to buy bread. I would sit at the docks with the older fishermen, who looked at me with pity and amusement, but I stayed. I kept casting, and slowly the tides began to turn. One summer morning, after hours of struggling with a heavy net, I pulled up the largest catch I had ever seen, silver, scaled fish writhing and shimmering under the breaking dawn. I sold the load to a small restaurant that had just opened by the shore. The owner, an honest man named Mr. Delgado, shook my hand and told me, "If you keep this up, son, I'll buy from you every week." That was the spark. Word spread. More restaurants wanted my fish. They said it was fresher, cleaner, caught with care. I saved every coin I could, patching up my rowboat until I could finally afford a motorized one. My arms grew stronger, my back tougher, my eyes sharper for reading the currents. By the time I was 24, I had a crew of 2 men helping me. By 27, I owned 2 boats. The same family that had mocked me now enjoyed fish dinners paid for by my earnings, though they never admitted it came from me. And yet, despite all this, they still treated my business as though it were something temporary, a stepping stone, something unworthy compared to Claire's golden path. Ah, Claire, my sister, the family jewel. She was 3 years younger than me and everything my parents wanted in a child. Brilliant, elegant, ambitious. Teachers adored her, relatives bragged about her, neighbors praised her. She never had to work a day in her life. Everything was provided for her so she could focus on her future. Meanwhile, I was the shadow child, the one who smelled like fish, the one who was never invited to sit proudly at family gatherings because what was there to say? Elias caught another net full of sardines, but I didn't resent her, not at first. I thought, let her shine, let her fly. I'll keep building my little empire quietly. One day they'll see what I've built. One day they'll be proud of me too. Every nail I hammered into the dockside shed that became my first office, every bucket of fish I carried until my shoulders ached, I told myself it was worth it. Not just for me, but for the family who never believed in me. By 30, I had something real. A fleet of 4 sturdy boats, contracts with half the city's best restaurants, and men who relied on me to feed their families. My dirty fishing business was now a registered company with steady income, paperwork, and even a reputation of respect in the market. Still, at family dinners, no one asked me about my day. Instead, it was always Claire, Claire's grades, Claire's scholarships, Claire's bright, shining future, and yet I held on to hope. One day I thought, I'll sit at this table, and they'll look at me with the same pride they look at her. One day they'll understand that my nets, my sweat, and my sea, they were not just survival, they were legacy. I didn't know then that the very people I was building this for would soon rip it out of my hands, that the family who mocked me would one day steal the thing I loved most, that the business I cast with my bare hands would become the knife they drove into my back, but that part of the story comes later. For now, all I knew was the sea, the salt, and the pride of watching something grow from the ocean floor to a name that mattered. The sea gave me everything. The family, as I would learn, would take it all away. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came in whispers. At first, I noticed small things. A strange man inspecting one of my boats at the dock. A restaurant owner hesitating before renewing a contract, mumbling something about new arrangements. My crew whispering among themselves, avoiding my eyes. But I brushed it off. Fishing was a business of uncertainty. Some weeks were better than others. Competitors came and went. I thought the unease was temporary, until the day I walked down to the harbor and found strangers unloading crates from my boat. I remember the smell of the sea that morning, sharp with salt and seaweed, the gulls crying overhead. I was carrying a ledger under my arm, ready to check the morning's catch. But when I reached the dock, 2 men I had never seen before were barking orders, their hands all over the nets and ropes that belonged to me. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sharp, commanding. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of them turned, squinting at me as though I was the intruder. "This vessel's under new ownership," he said flatly. "You shouldn't be here." The words knocked the breath out of me. For a moment I thought I had misheard. New ownership. I repeated, "This is my boat. I built this company. Who the hell do you think you are?" The man only shrugged, handed me a folded piece of paper, and went back to unloading fish that should have been mine. The paper was a legal transfer of ownership, stamped, signed, sealed, and at the bottom of the page, my family's signatures. My mother's, my father's, even Claire's. I don't remember walking home that day. I only remember standing outside my parents' house, my hands shaking so violently I could barely knock on the door. When my mother opened it, she looked startled, almost guilty, before plastering on her usual polite smile. "Elias, you're early." I shoved the paper into her hands. "What is this?" Her eyes flickered. She called for my father. He came shuffling from the kitchen, avoiding my gaze. Claire appeared on the stairs, her face lit with that same smug glow she always carried. "What is this?" I demanded again, my voice breaking. Finally, my father sighed. "Elias, it was the right thing to do. For the family." "The right thing? You sold my business, my company, without even telling me. It's not like that." My mother rushed in, her voice sickly sweet. "You've done well, son, but let's be honest, it's just fishing. It's hard labor, unstable income, no future. Claire has been accepted to a prestigious PhD program in London. Do you understand what that means? She can lift our family's name. She'll bring respect, opportunities. We needed to support her." I stared at her, my blood boiling. "So you took everything I worked for and sold it? For her degree?" Claire's voice rang out, calm and smug, like a queen addressing a servant. "You should be proud, Elias. My research will change lives. Your boats, they're just boats. What's a few nets compared to building a career that matters?" Her words cut deeper than any blade. "Just boats, just nets." My father crossed his arms. "You'll find other work. You're strong, you've got your health, you don't need much. Claire needs this more than you do." I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me. My whole life, every scar, every early morning, every deal I fought to secure, dismissed, erased, and sold for signatures I hadn't even seen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the papers to shreds, but something inside me snapped into silence. A cold, sharp silence. I looked at them one by one, my mother's condescending pity, my father's stubborn justification, Claire's triumphant little smile. "Fine," I said, my voice low, steady. "If that's how you see it. They thought they had broken me. They thought I would walk away, bitter but powerless. But in that silence, I made myself a promise. I would not beg. I would not fight them with words. I would not waste my breath trying to convince people who had already decided I was worthless. Instead, I would build again, not from scratch, because I had already planned for storms like this. Quietly, patiently, I had cast a wider net. They thought they had taken everything from me, but the truth was, they had no idea what I already owned. And one day soon, they would find out the cost of betraying the son who built an empire with his bare hands. When a storm capsizes your boat, you either drown in the waves or learn to swim deeper. I chose the latter. The night after I discovered the betrayal, I sat alone in my small office by the docks, the office that, according to the papers, no longer belonged to me. My chair creaked under my weight. My hands rested on the scarred wood of the desk, and I stared at the photographs on the wall. The first boat I bought, the first big catch, the faces of my crew. Smiling with pride, they thought they had erased me. They thought I was finished, but what they didn't know was that long before this day, I had seen the signs. I had always known my family looked down on me. Their love for Claire was blinding, absolute. Every conversation at dinner, every decision at home revolved around her future. I knew one day they would ask me for more than I could give. I just never thought they would take it without asking. So quietly I had prepared. Years ago, when the business began to grow beyond one boat, I registered a holding company under another name, a legal shell, a mask, with me hidden as the true owner. Through it, I bought shares in the fishing cooperative, invested in dock warehouses, and even purchased a silent majority of my own company. My family thought I was just a fisherman with calloused hands. They never suspected I was also the man behind contracts and signatures, the man whose name appeared only in coded legal paperwork. While they toasted to Claire's acceptance letter and sold my business to fund her dreams, I already held the nets that bound the industry together. I spent the next months in silence, letting them believe they had won. I didn't argue, didn't shout. Instead, I worked. By day, I returned to the sea under a new company name, commanding a vessel they didn't know belonged to me. My old crew, men loyal not to the papers but to me, followed without hesitation. We fished harder than ever, supplying the very restaurants my family thought they had secured through their sale. By night, I signed deals in quiet offices, extending credit to restaurant owners, tying them closer to me with loyalty clauses. When competitors tried to move in, I undercut them just enough to drive them out, then offered partnership deals that made me indispensable. Piece by piece, contract by contract, I built a net so wide, so invisible, that by the time my family realized it existed, it would be too late. Meanwhile, Claire sent postcards from London, expensive cafes, libraries with marble pillars, smiling with her friends, wrapped in scarves that probably cost more than one of my boat engines. Each card ended with a line dripping in condescension. "I hope you're doing well, Elias. Remember, one day my research might even help fishermen like you." I kept every postcard, tucking them in a drawer like trophies of her arrogance. But not everything was as glamorous for them as it seemed. Without my steady income, the household began to strain. London was expensive. Flights, tuition, rent, books, food, the money vanished faster than they could earn it. My father picked up extra shifts at the factory. My mother quietly sold pieces of jewelry she had once sworn she'd pass down to Claire on her wedding day. And still, Claire demanded more. I heard whispers from neighbors, my parents borrowing money, promising repayment once Claire finished her PhD. My father even approached one of my old suppliers, trying to arrange a deal, only to be politely turned away. That supplier was now bound by contract to me. Their arrogance had blinded them. They thought by taking my company they had taken my lifeline. But the truth was, they had cut themselves off. They had sold the body but left me the soul, and the soul was thriving. By the time Claire was in her 3rd year abroad, my fleet had doubled. My warehouses were filled to bursting. My company, though hidden, was supplying nearly half the city's seafood. Competitors were either swallowed by me or dependent on me. I had become, in silence, the man they could never imagine me to be. Every coin I earned, every deal I closed, I thought of that day in the living room. My mother's voice dripping with pity, my father's cold justification, Claire's smug declaration. Your boats, just boats, my work matters more. One day, I promised myself, I would show them what those boats were worth. One day, I would sit at the same table they had dismissed me from, and I would lay down the truth like a net too wide to escape. And when that day came, they would see not just what I had built, but what they had lost, because they hadn't just sold my business. They had sold their place in my future. The night of the family dinner, the house smelled of roasted lamb and garlic bread, a meal fit for celebration. My mother had polished the silver where she usually reserved for holidays. The table gleamed under the light, lined with candles, wine glasses, and dishes that reminded me of a past where I had once thought I belonged. Claire had returned home at last, PhD in hand, a degree framed in gold and displayed on the mantel like a trophy. My parents glowed with pride, their heads held high, as though they had carried her across the finish line themselves. I sat quietly at the far end of the table, dressed in a clean shirt, but still smelling faintly of the sea. I noticed how my mother wrinkled her nose when I leaned in to take my seat, how my father gave me a look that said, "Behave yourself." Claire raised her wine glass. "To family," she said, her smile perfect, practiced. "To sacrifices made for the greater good. I wouldn't be here without you all." She didn't glance at me. Not once. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. "We gave everything for you, Claire, and it was worth every cent. Every cent. My cent, my business, my life." I let them clink their glasses, laugh, and chatter about the brilliance of her research, the awards she might win, the job offers she would receive. I stayed silent, carving my lamb, chewing slowly, letting the salt and bitterness dissolve on my tongue. Finally, Claire turned her gaze to me. "And what about you, Elias?" she asked sweetly. "Still fishing?" The table chuckled. My father shook his head. "Elias never changes, but at least he can be proud that he helped in his way." I set down my fork, wiped my mouth with the napkin, and looked at each of them in turn. The silence that followed made the room feel colder. "Proud," I said softly. "You sold my business out from under me. You called it sacrifice, you called it duty, but what you really did was steal." My mother stiffened. "Now, Elias, don't ruin this evening, ruin it." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "The only thing ruined here is your illusion that I was powerless. You thought you sold everything I had, but you never knew the truth." From my bag, I pulled out a thick envelope and slid it onto the table. My father frowned and opened it. "Legal documents, ownership contracts, what is this?" he muttered, his face paling. "It's every share of the company you sold," I said. "Bought back, legally mine. In fact, I own more now than I ever did. The fishing fleet, the warehouses, the supply contracts, half the restaurants in this city depend on me, while you were draining yourselves dry to fund Claire's expensive little dream. I was building an empire behind your backs." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Claire's smile finally faltered. You can't be serious," she stammered. "Oh, I'm very serious." I leaned back, calm now, savoring the weight of every word. You sold my sweat, my scars, my years on the sea as if it were worthless, and you gave it away to buy a piece of paper for Claire. But while you were laughing at me, I was buying you out, one signature at a time. My father's hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. You own it all, every last piece. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Claire's cheeks flushed red, her nails digging into the tablecloth. You're telling me, she spat, that while I was studying day and night, you were hoarding money, that you were— No one Something real rendered it. I interrupted, something lasting. You have a title on your wall. I have an empire that feeds thousands. Which one of us do you think the world respects more? The candles flickered as if the house itself was holding its breath. Finally, I stood. You taught me something valuable, and that family can betray you faster than strangers. You sold me for Claire's future, but you forgot one thing. You don't get to decide my worth. You don't own me. Not anymore. I looked at Claire, her eyes blazing with fury. Enjoy your degree, because from now on you'll need it. I won't fund your life. I won't save you when the bills come. And I won't carry the family name you tried to bury me under. Then, softer, almost like a whisper carried on the tide, you sold your son for nothing, and now you've lost him forever. I walked out before they could speak, leaving the papers spread across the table like fish guts on a dock. Behind me, I heard my mother's muffled sobs, my father's heavy silence, and Claire's angry hiss. But I didn't look back. The night air hit my face, cool and sharp. Out in the harbor, my boats were waiting, their masts rising against the starlit sky like spears. My men were already preparing for tomorrow's catch, my business, my legacy, and for the first time in years, I smiled. The sea had always been honest. It never betrayed me. It was my family who had underestimated me. And now, finally, they knew. The son they had dismissed, the fisherman they had mocked, had outsmarted them all.